Hello everyone, welcome to Legal Darshan. In today's video, we are going to work on few concepts. Okay, one is what is crime? Okay, how do we define crime? Is there any fixed definition of crime? And how does an act becomes a crime? Okay, so if murder is crime, if theft is crime, how does that particular act, how an act is becoming crime? That is something we are going to understand in this video. And of course, we will then understand the relationship between crime and sin. Okay, why this is important? Because when we study criminology, we are basically also studying evolution of crime as well. Okay, how crime has evolved time and again, how criminals have evolved time and again. So that is the whole purpose of criminology, right? Now, why sin? Okay, on the question why sin, it is a very, very well established fact that before any legal system coming into picture, we were governed by religion, morality, and reason. Religion, morality, and reason. And of course, our natural law school, we must have done it in jurisprudence. Our natural law school, countering which positive school and sociological school further come up, our natural law school is particularly based on how religion affects the law, how morality affects the law, how religion and morality contributes in formation of law. So it's not that crime did not exist when law wasn't there. Crime existed, but how did it evolve? How was it happening? What are its connection with the sin, with the religious grounds? That is something we are going to discuss when we are when we will be drawing an analogy between sin and crime. Okay, when we are we will be drawing analogy, also we will be drawing distinction between sin and crime. So the whole objective of this discussion today is to understand what is a crime. Okay, now coming on to the features of crime. Now one thing, okay, now one thing that has to be said, that what is a crime? Okay, so let's say we do not have a penal code, let's say we do not have IPC, we do not have BNS, we have nothing. Okay, how do we identify what is a crime? So some basic parameters on identifying crime can be: number one, something which is immoral. Okay, so we all know that harassing a woman, sexual harassment is immoral. Okay, murdering someone is immoral. If we forget that we have any law, okay, let's assume we have no law. So if you have to define crime, how are you going to define it? So one parameter could be something which is wrong, something which is wrong in the eye of general public. Okay, something which, for example, like harassing a woman, murdering a person, theft, or robbery, kidnapping a child, all of it is, against morality, against public order as well. Okay, now then second comes up that if, a riot breaks down in the street and it affects individuals at large, is it not a crime? It will also become a crime because it is disrupting public order, it is disrupting peace also. Okay, so that is one parameter on how you will identify, yes, this particular act of, doing riot or doing affray or anything, that could be crime. Okay, then third is something that could be socially harmful. Okay, so this, when we talk of an act becomes a crime when, the act shows some kind of deviance, act of deviance. Deviance is that this is a society, this is a structure of the society, and you are not blending in it. So for example, this is the rules and norms of a society, and you are going away from it, you are doing something that society disregards to be a good act. Then you can also say that something which becomes socially harmful also becomes a crime. But does all socially harmful act should be crime? So the answer, so the, question that whether all the acts that society feel is deviant, that society feel that they are harmful to us, should they become criminalized? Should we can call them a crime? So one example of that could be homosexuality. Okay, now when Navtej did not happen, Navtej Singh Johar did not happen, we had 377, which criminalized homosexuality. So homosexuality was criminalized because society saw it as a threat. But whether it is really a threat, should it actually be criminalized? That the court observed in Navtej Singh Johar and struck down. struck down homosexuality as a crime, right? So socially harmful, whether all acts that society perceives to be harmful should be crime, that is one question we will also look into later in later discussions. But yes, to an extent, yes, socially harmful acts can be crime. Socially harmful acts can also be, killing someone, disrupting public order, going against the societal norms, which includes giving respect and dignity to everyone, kidnapping a child. All of these can be socially harmful and can be punishable. For example, human trafficking, for example, indecent representation of women. Yes, we accept these are socially harmful and they are crime. But does all socially harmful act makes crime or not? That's something we need to look into the upcoming discussion. Okay. Now, another feature of crime is never constant. Okay, so you cannot just have a box and say that all the ingredients of this box, all the elements in this box are crime. No, they are not crime, because crime is evolving, crime is ever changing. 50 years down the line, we had murder as a crime, we had treason as a crime, but we did not have cyber crimes as crime. Okay, later on, when we developed infrastructure, IT infrastructure, we had computers, we had mobile, we had internet, a new domain of crime emerged out, which became our cyber crimes, which became a concern of IT Act and cyber security. So crime evolves according to time. Crime evolves from time to time. Okay. Now, also one thing is that crime is never constant, even across jurisdictions. So one thing can be a crime in another jurisdiction and not necessary that that would be a crime in India. Okay, so maybe holding cryptocurrency will be a crime in XYZ company, but it is not a crime in India. Similarly, act of necrophilia is crime in jurisdictions like New Zealand and jurisdictions like United Kingdom, but it is still not made a crime in India, whereas it is immoral, whereas it is socially harmful as well, right? It degrades the moral fabric of the society, but because there is a matter of jurisdiction involved. So crime evolves with how society develops, crime evolves with the characteristics of a society also. So one thing that we understand about crime can be something which is immoral, wrong, which can be socially harmful, and which has a punishment that society dislikes it. Some kind of punishment is associated with it, penal consequences is associated with it, and crime is ever evolving. It evolves with the society, it evolves with the duration, it evolves with the timeline as well. Okay, now, is there any specific definition of crime? Can we say that there is a fixed definition and that only will be the crime? The answer is no, because there is one jurist, okay, Roussel. So Roussel says that to define crime is a difficult task, okay, and which no writer has satisfactorily done, because crime has many dimensions. Crime is a study in many dimensions. Okay, so for example, Austin, we have done it in him in Positive School. He says that only the law which is backed up by Parliament, that which will bring sanction, it is the command of the sovereign. Okay, that will be the law. Okay, so something which is not the command of sovereign, that will never be an offense. Okay, so we are going through a positivist lens, and Austin's definition of crime is something which the sovereign commands to be a crime. Whereas when we go with the perspective of legal moralism, okay, we are looking at Devlin. Lord Devlin is saying that whichever act, degrades the moral fabric of a society shall be a crime. Okay, so many other jurists, many other psychologists, many sociologists, many criminologists, they are giving their own definitions of crime, and these all contribute to the literature, but these all, according to Roussel, are inadequate to give a basic layman's and concrete definition of crime at one place. Okay, so, for example, Garofalo. Garofalo is also a criminologist. He's also a jurist. He says that crime, crime is an immoral and harmful act that is immoral and harmful act that is regarded as criminal. Immoral and uh, harmful act that is regarded as criminal by public opinion. So now Gruffalo is basically relying on the public opinion, that what public opinion finds to be criminal, that act needs to be immoral, harmful, and public is also finding it, criminal conduct, then that can be called as a crime. So for example, if public does not find an act as a crime, it will not be crime in words of Garofalo, which is also a faulty definition in opinion of Roussel and other jurists as well. Now then we have a lot of other theories which tells us how does an act becomes a crime for crimes per se. Okay, then we have also jurists pointing out that why crime actually happens. So sociological school says because of socio-economic causes. Then we have economic school which is saying, economic theory which is saying, Marxist theory which is saying that economy is the major contributor for the crime. And basically then that is a discussion that we will uptake when we look at the causation of crime. When we look at social definition of crime, okay, some sociologists say that crime is an index of societal pathology. Crime is an index of societal pathology. Now what pathology is, when we humans go for blood test and we get detected our blood test, if there is some problem, that is called pathology. Okay, so we all know that these labs are called path labs. So similarly, sociologists say that crime is the index of societal pathology. The index, as much as crime grows, society is becoming sick. So crime is also perceived as an index of societal pathology by some of the sociologists as well. Okay, then when we look at the legal definition of crime, we will take the help of positive school, we will take the help of Austin, and we will come back to what the legal aspect of crime is. Okay, but that we will come after we will have a discussion on sin and relation of crime and sin. Okay, then we come to theories of criminalization. This is something we were just discussing, that an act does not just become a crime because law is backing that up. Okay, just because we have positive school saying that law is the command of sovereign, and if sovereign has said sedition be an offense, treason be an offense, it will be an offense. There are other theories of criminalization also, which tells how an act becomes crime, how an act is become criminal. So first theory is of legal moralism, which is given by Patrick Devlin, and he says that immoral acts in the eye of society, which degrades the moral fabric of the society, will be a crime. Similarly, there is another concept of legal paternalism, that any act which harms an individual, state is bound to protect it, and in that interest of legal paternalism, that act could be made a crime. Okay, then we have harm principle. Now, harm principle is being advocated by J.S. Mill and also by Hart. Both of them says that until and unless an act is not harming, it should not be made a crime. So if a person is having homosexual and there is homosexuality involved, if it is not harming me, then what's the point in making it criminal? Okay, so harm principle says that only the act by which you are harmed should be criminalized. Then there is social defense theory of criminalization, which protect collective security, and therefore any act which degrades the fabric of a society, that can also be called as a crime. So these are some theories of criminalization which we may apply to make an act criminal. Okay, to make a conduct criminal. That is what theory of criminalization is. Now we come to sins, the concept of sin. Okay, so when we discussed theory of criminalization, how some act becomes crime, we are basically studying the evolution of crime, that how various crimes have become crime, various acts have become crime under our penal codes, right? Now, also on the fact that are crimes universal, the answer is some crimes are, but not all crimes are universal, because one act can be a crime in India but not be a crime in US or UK, right? Now let's come to sin. Now when we study crime, it is always an intrinsic discussion, that how do you differentiate a crime and a sin. Okay, so what is a sin and what is a crime, that is we need to look into this few minutes discussion that is going to follow up. Now, sin has a very religious aspect. Okay. Now, when we look at sin, sin is certainly rooted in religion. Okay. So, for example, killing an ant, killing an animal, killing a a bird, it can be a sin, but it is not necessary that it is always going to be a crime. Okay, so for sin, the punishment is repentance. Okay, so there is, when we look at Hinduism, there is a whole Puran that is talking about that, what happens after your death. So your account of good deed and bad deed is kept in check, and you are accordingly awarded the afterlife. You are accordingly awarded a new life, or you are, your ways are made to either Swarg or Narak. Similarly, is the concept of Christianity. Even Christianity believes in an afterlife. There is Sharia law is also putting prohibition on certain things, calling them as sins, calling those act as guna, right? But then in the same way, whether these acts which are religiously prohibited, which are said that religiously they are sin, can they transgress and become crime? That is something we need to understand in this discussion. Okay, so crime is rooted in sin. One can never deny that crime is rooted in sin. But what sin is essentially a moral or religious transgression against divine law. Okay, so something that you are doing against the command of the divine. In Hinduism, it could be Manusmriti or the religious scriptures. In Islam, it could be something you are going against the orders of Allah that is contained in Quran or Sunnah. And in Christianity, if you are going against the Bible, etc., then what is happening? You are committing a sin. So a moral or religious transgression against divine law is sin. But then, are we really following divine law? The answer is no, because with time, the law has evolved from natural school to the school of realism, and there have been various shifts throughout. Then the whole source of sin, that why an act becomes a sin, is religion, theology, spiritual doctrines. Okay, spirituality, religion, theology, that divine law becomes the source of sin in particular religions. Now, one thing we can see here, that even the sins are not constant. Crime was not constant, it was evolving. Even the sins are not constant in every religion. They are not same. They are based on different beliefs. They are grounded in different beliefs. Okay, so for example, divorce in Hinduism was not allowed. It was allowed in Narad Smriti, but Manusmriti did not allow it. Divorce wasn't allowed in Hindus. It was all because of the reforms that came through Hindu Code Bill, through the efforts of many pioneers, that divorce is now a part of Hindu law. But earlier, divorce wasn't allowed in Hindu law, because Hindu law believed that marriage is a union. It is an eternal union of life after lives, and it cannot be, just left aside by a divorce. So, but similar goes with Christianity. Even in Christianity, divorce is not allowed. But in Islam, there is no such rule that, divorce is not allowed. So, divorce has its forms applicable in Muslim law as well. But, in Indian law, it was not a part of Indian scriptures primarily. It was not a part of Manusmriti, because that was not the command of divine law earlier. So, see, I'm not going into marriage laws per se, but I'm just going to, bring to your attention the fact that even the sins across various religion, across various spiritual doctrines are variable. So, why not crime be variable? Crime is, of course, going to be variable, because it is, of course, a developed notion of sin, but diverted its ways from the specificity of morality and religion, right? Now we come to the sin. What is sin? We were discussing. Now, the question that whether crime is rooted in sin, the answer is, of course, yes, because as I was just talking in the beginning of this discussion, that crime is, earlier there was no difference between what a crime is, what a sin is, because the laws were being governed by religious scriptures. We know that religion used to be the divine law, religion used to be the command, and therefore we were following it. Okay, so there is an overlap between crime and sin. One cannot deny that the concept of sin has no contribution to the development of the concept of crime. It necessarily has that particular aspect, that crime has evolved on the moral fabric of the religion, or moral fabric or the religious fabric of what a sin is. But later on, it particularly diverted in the light of secular laws, and it separated itself from the moral absolutism, and therefore backed up by sanction as a command of sovereign, which we read in positive law school, right? Now, basically, when we discuss public law. Okay, when we discuss public law at a higher academic level, higher academic discussion, public law also has gone through phases. Okay, what public good is was in ancient times defined by the religion, reason, and then later on it got converted to communitarian grounds, that what serves the community well is public good, and public law is governing that. Similar goes with the concept of crime, because crime necessarily is public law. Okay, and with the evolution of criminal law is a branch of public law, right? And with the evolution of time, with the evolution of society, crime cannot be just limited to absolute moralism, right? Or moral absolutism. We have to take divergence in the light of secular laws. We have to take interest in the public interest. We have to protect the civil liberties of the people and then redefine the notions of crime. So one can say that sin, the concept of sin, has some role to play in the emergence of crime as a concept, but then there is a deviation that we see in the modern legal systems, right? Now what is the relationship between crime and sin is that one is both of them regulate conduct and consequences. Okay, religiously scriptures are also holding the conduct, holding the consequences if you go beyond the lines of religion or morality. But when it comes to crime, crimes are of nature, crimes are of such secular nature that even if you are an atheist, even if you are not religious, even if you say that I don't follow any religion, crime are still going to regulate your conduct. But if I say I renounce my religion, I am not a part of my religion, then in that case sin or the conduct that religion is governing and consequences that religion is doing for me will not be of any importance. But crime will always be applicable, criminal law will always be applicable. And one is, while crime is temporal, sin is basically spiritual in nature. And when we look at the modern view, now no longer morality is equivalent to law, which it was when we were discussing the natural law school. But with the evolution of Austin's positive school, contribution of Hans Kelsen, and also to an extent contribution of HLA Hart, we now know that morality and law are two separate domains. Religion and law are two separate domains, and only the acts which are backed up by the command of sovereign shall be crime in aspect of criminal law as well. Okay, now the key differences comes is that the source of crime is legal, whereas source of sin is religious. Jurisdiction, it depends from state to state. India might have one law and USA might have another law, and this particular sin is governed by the religious scriptures, religious authorities. Enforcement is by police or by criminal system, courts, etc. Whereas these enforcement is by religious rituals. Okay, so for example, if somebody has committed a sin, they believe there are ways like you can go and have a holy dip in the river, or maybe you can do some punya dan, etc., etc. That are the religious rituals. How we enforce what happens after you commit a sin. Punishment is imprisonment or any kind of forfeiture, fine, etc. when it comes to crime. But when it comes to sin, there is only repentance and penance that you can do to remove that sin out of your diary of records, right? Now universality is not even there in crimes and sins, both of them, because some crimes, like for example slavery, etc., they are universal crimes, but notion of crime varies across boundaries, and so does notion of sin across religion. So that is one aspect when we talk of universality. Now on the question whether all the sins, because we just learned whether all the sins are they crime, the answer is no. Okay, because for example, if intoxication, it's a very good example. So intoxication is an offense, is a guna in Islam, right? And killing cow slaughter or animal slaughter, let's say cow slaughter and specific, we will not talk about cow slaughter because some laws are there, but animal slaughter. Okay, so animal slaughter, or even any kind of jeev hatya, as we say in Hinduism, that is necessarily a sin, because we say jeev hatya paap hai, right? But is it always a crime? The answer is no. Okay. Intoxication, whether it is a crime, the answer is no. It is not a crime. It can be, it can lead to crime, but the answer is intoxication is not a crime. But in religion, it is a sin. And when we say whether all the crimes are sin, again the answer is no. Because if I am violating traffic light, I am violating traffic signal, that can be a criminal conduct or quasi-criminal conduct, but is it a sin? The answer is no, it is not a sin. Religion is not governing me whether I overspeed or whether I don't wear my helmet, right? So that is the difference. Of course, crime and sin are overlapping when it comes to murder, when it comes to affecting the dignity of an individual, but they are also distinct in certain ways. So if I have to represent it with the help of a diagram, I am going to represent it with something like, this. I'll just draw a better diagram. Yeah. So let's say this is crime and this is sin. Okay, so they are distinct, but there is some overlapping as well. So they are overlapped, but yet they are distinct. That is the relationship that exists between crime and sins. Okay. Now, when we now come to what is crime. Okay, now when we look at what is crime, so a good definition of crime, which is backed up by law, can be that crime is an act or omission by law as a public wrong. Okay, because crime is a public wrong, and it is basically violation of penal laws. It is basically the violation of violation of an act which by command of sovereign has become the crime. Okay, and the key elements, we know what how a crime is constituted. Key elements of crime, when we come back now to the Indian jurisdiction or to the jurisdiction, in many in many jurisdictions, this is the principle that nisi actus non facit reum nisi mensit rea becomes the principle. Actus non facit reum nisi mensit rea. This is going to be the discussion in our next video. That becomes the principle to define what is crime. Okay, so crime is an equal of actus rea as well as mens rea, and it is an act which is doing which is punishable by law. An act or omission which is punishable by law therefore becomes the crime. To ascertain what exactly are crime, to number what exactly are crime. However, there can be various reasons of why they have become the crime because of the reasons we have discussed earlier. But the modern day context is that actus non facit reum nisi mensit rea is the applicable principle of criminal law, that for a crime to happen, we need actus rea as well as mens rea, and therefore the punishment has to be given. So these are the elements of the crime. And for today, I will stop here. The conclusion is crime is a social or moral construct that is shaped by law and further morality. Theories explain why and how laws are made, why and how particular acts are made crime. And crime and sin share roots, but then there is a diversion because crime cannot be based on moral absolutism, right? And then this is the final discussion on in this video. If you have any questions, any feedbacks, any suggestions, anything you want to communicate to us, any more topics you want us to cover, you can write to me at legaldarshan@gmail.com. The email ID is on the screen, and you may drop them in the comment box below in the video. I hope the discussion is useful. For more such discussion, please stay tuned with us on Legal Darshan. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.